From the New York Post, Steve Buscemi spotted with black eye, swollen face after random New York City attack. I'm going to be completely honest with all of you guys. When I was watching Fox News and they announced this story, I started laughing. This is a guy who made a video for the Daily Wire. I believe it was him. And, you know, I don't wish any harm on Steve Buscemi. I'm a fan. I like his work. His 30 Rock meme, his appearance, where he was that private investigator and he goes to the high school and he's like, how do you do, fellow kids? Like, this guy's got some great work behind his belt.
Yeah.
But he went on the Daily Show, and I believe this is what it was him, and made provided a voiceover for the segment. Biden perfectly adequate under the circumstances, where they basically did this joke where Trump was so bad that even though Biden was bad, it was perfectly acceptable. It was perfectly adequate. And so, you know, I don't want to put the weight of all of the weird crime we're seeing just on Joe Biden, but it's on the Democrats as a whole.
Yeah.
Perfectly adequate. What was so bad under Trump? I think what I can really say is, I don't mean to belittle the fact some guy attacked him. That's horrifying. But I hope people like Steve wake up now and realize all of that propaganda about how under Trump it was the worst country, the country was in dire straits, it was the worst thing imaginable, can truly now understand it was actually pretty good.
It was really good.
Right.
We're just talking about the stock market. I mean, remember what your 401k looked like then. Doing pretty well under Donald Trump.
The best numbers of our lives.
Yes.
It's funny because that's what Jim Cramer said. And you know what it means when Jim Cramer says something? The opposite then happens.
Yes, correct.
And after he says this, the next administration gives us Joe Biden, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of these incidents in New York City are particularly unfortunate because these are preventable in my belief, but there just isn't the political will in the city to prevent crimes like this. There's like a top 100 worst offenders who commit like 80 or 90% of the crimes in the city. If there was the political will to deal with the worst criminals, we'd see a dramatic decrease in attacks like this. Many of these attackers are repeat offenders, but because of some soft on crime policies, because of a lot of different reasons, because of how democratic the city is, people just don't want to deal with the issues like this. And if you're not in the right mental capacity, if you're a drug addict, if you're a homeless person on the street, we need to have a responsible way to do outreach to you, and allowing you to fester and have manic episodes and attack others on the street isn't ethical. It's not moral to you, to the person, or any of these victims. So I think it's unfortunate because these are preventable in my estimation.
I mean, you live there. Yeah. I mean, just outside observer, I mean, wouldn't you say crime is worse in New York than it's been?
I think there's something to say about if you look like a stereotypical easy lick, then you're more likely to get attacked. That is, like, if you look like he looks like an old man who can't defend himself. If you're a woman, if you're an Asian, you're more likely to be, I think, picked on, unfortunately, by bullies in the city. And we have opportunities to stop this. We in New York City elected a cop mayor, Eric Adams, a former cop mayor, and he's putting more people on the subway. At one time, the National Guard was supposed to come in with Kathy Hochul on the subway and whatnot, but it's a real issue we're seeing.
I just figured, you know, because you live up there, you like living dangerously. You know, you're an adrenaline junkie, and you're replacing skydiving with walking the streets of New York.
I mean, it's really the cultural mecca, I think, of the United States. It really is the epicenter, I think, of the United States, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I used to think that.
Pitch? Yeah.
I did think that too. I remember the first time I went to New York, and it depends on the culture, but Los Angeles, of course, is massive. Nashville's massive for music, and New York is, of course, massive for a lot of things. And I went to New York for the first time, and it was Occupy Wall Street. First time I drove across, man, I don't even remember what I drove across. It must have been the Brooklyn Bridge or something. No, it wouldn't have been the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't remember. All I know is I remember looking up at the city and thinking, like, man, this is crazy how big this place is. Yeah, I think it was Brooklyn. I think I went south through like Staten Island into Brooklyn or something. And once there, the amount of available opportunity was massive. And then after a couple of years, it started to not be. And then there were a few bombings, there were riots, things started to get more and more unstable. And then it sort of flattened out. And that's when I was like, New York is no longer offering what it was, 4 years ago. I'd been in New York for like 4 or 5 years. And I was like, now it's just, there's not much going on. It's sort of flattened out, especially with the internet. A lot of people are working in, other places. And then with the riots and the crime, there were a couple bombings, a bombing in Manhattan on like 25th Street. I'm just like, I'm gonna go to Jersey.
Yeah.
And then slowly moved further and further away. And now I would argue New York is a cultural mecca. It's the anti-culture. It is the mecca of the destruction of this country. And I find the culture of New York to be akin to walking through a swamp. It's not the swamp. That one's, what do we got? Like 60 miles due east.
Yep.
But New York is a different kind of disgusting slime-filled bog with monsters lurking its streets and brave adventurers like Elad carrying a torch through the wilderness.
So I don't think New York City is for the faint of heart, but I think, in my estimation, Brooklyn alone, the borough of Brooklyn alone, is better than most cities. I don't know if that's selling Tim on anything because he hates cities.
No, it's a city that voted for a cop mayor who's still a Democrat who's still not solving any of the problems.
There are a ton of issues in New York City, and there's no denying that. But here's the thing. If you want the highest paying jobs in the country are in New York City. If you want to make it on Broadway, you're in New York City. If you want to make it in fashion, you're in New York City. If you want to make it as a hotshot lawyer, all the best and biggest law firms are in New York City. Everything, all the relevant things.
This is the thing that I love about like native New Yorkers. I have a family friend. She's from New York. Everyone in her family's always been from New York. They live like, right in the heart of Manhattan. And she was like, well, New York is the center of the universe. I wish more places felt as proud of where they are as like native New Yorkers who are like, everything good happens from the city. And even though people are getting punched on the street, I will defend it. I think it's interesting.
At least he's still alive. He didn't get shot.
What if more states had cities that like people were like, no, that's the best place. I'm going to live there until we would stop seeing this mass. Actually, I know that's something West Virginia struggles with, of young people who are like, there's no opportunity here. Like, I wish there were more cities in the country that, even mid-sized cities where people are like, this is the best place and I want to be here.
The opportunity availability in New York has gone way down and the cost of living has gone way up. It's no longer. So when I left, it was at the point where I was in a 1-bedroom that they called a 2-bedroom because they put up a wall in. So you had a kitchen and you had a bedroom and they sectioned off part of the kitchen into another bedroom and called it a 2-bedroom. and like, so where's the living room? The kitchen?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
I think if you're a young man, the gender ratio in New York City is already like 60-40. And then amongst those
60-40 male to female?
Yeah. Or 60% female, 40% male. And then among the males,
that makes sense.
About 25% of them are gay. So your numbers in New York City are really good. So if you're a young man, want to go on a quick adventure, a few years in and out, if you can make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere.
Right. And the best thing is the moral predisposition of these women means you're not going to have any kids, even if you wanted to.
You could rescue them in New York City.
In and out.
You rescue them and then you leave. You take them back to where you came from.
When I was there, I had this very small apartment, a couple hundred. It was very small. It was 2 rooms and a kitchen, and it is relatively small, and it was $2,100 a month. And then when I left, when my lease ended, it jumped up to like $2,350. And because I knew the person who actually moved in, I met him later, and they were like, "It's $2,350 now," and I was like, "Wow." I was like, just right away up a couple $100. And it's probably 3-something now or more, but no one's making that much money in the city. So the opportunity is down, the costs are way up. You look at this city, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're correct. It's probably mostly women for whatever.
Especially in the younger demographic, yeah.
There was a funny post I saw on X where a woman said she went to a frat party, and the dude started playing the national anthem and waving American flags, and all the women got silent and started looking around at each other. And that's actually what we're seeing. Women overwhelmingly leftist, men becoming overwhelmingly right. That split's happening. So considering the politics of New York, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. And then perhaps that could explain why the crime is so high. There's less men who are working the public response, police, firefighters, etc. More women walking the streets, and then deranged criminals are like, this is the place to be. No one can stop you. They want to defund the cops. The cops are nowhere to be found. And it's mostly a bunch of defenseless women walking down the streets who can't have guns. New York is awful.
Attacks like this need to be stopped.
New York is awful. And I agree with you. It is like the anti-culture. It is not a conducive or friendly environment as it relates to starting families. And I'm not talking about like below replacement rate. Like, I have 1 kid. We did it. It's just not a conducive environment to that. I mean, obviously I'm biased here. West Virginia is far superior to New York.
Agreed.
Look, in West Virginia, family is the most important thing in our communities. It just is, and it's the center of the universe for us is family. And that's what I think we need to get back to as this country. And now, look, New York at one point probably was more like that. Certainly not like that now.
Did you mention something earlier about the? I don't know if West Virginia's still doing this, or if you brought it up that if people move here,
yes,
there's a grant or something.
Yes, it's called Ascend WV, Ascend West Virginia, and I believe it's $12,000 to $15,000 we will give you as a remote worker to move to the state of West Virginia.
How long do you have to be here in order to qualify for it? And how long after you get here are you still eligible for it?
Yeah, so there is a residency requirement, and I think it's like a year or two that you have to do that.
I think basically Timcast employees are looking at some money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's by county, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's not
so
open in
they'll
all
open it
counties.
up like an auction essentially and say, okay, Morgantown is now open and we got 1,000 slots here. And then they'll do Jefferson County's open. There'll be 1,000 slots, and they'll do it all around the state, kind of auctioned off. And basically you enter like a lottery to win it. And
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I think the opportunity is here. That's why we're here, and we've, at first our operation was split partly in Maryland, but we were on the border, literally 10 seconds away.
Yeah.
And that was a mistake. Shouldn't have done it. And now we're 100% everything is here in West Virginia, and this is where the real opportunity is. It is a much lower cost of living. There's a lot of land. It's cheap. It's available.
Yep.
You're when you're coming out here, you're not thinking about renting for $3,000. You're thinking about it's $3,000 a month to rent in New York. It's $1,300 to own out here.
Yes.
West Virginia, it's a beautiful state, but I think it has like one of the lowest GDP per capita.
So what? You're an hour from DC.
Okay.
So here's what we did.
Yeah, but the people in West Virginia still aren't having a lot of opportunity then. That's what I'm
it's-
saying. Like, it's a
it's-
bad place for jobs.
I
It's a
mean-
bad place for work. If your
Let's ask the
GDP...
treasurer.
But
Am I wrong here, though? No, I'm sure you know the stats better than I do.
Yeah, but look, if you're talking about GDP, all of it's relative. So in southern West Virginia, your average home is like $70,000. So it's
You're making
fine.
what
Yeah.
you need.
Yeah.
So when we were looking at where to set up the studio, first we were in Jersey, and we were in like the Woodbury area. So we're literally 10 minutes over the bridge from Philly, and we were looking at a building that I think was like 7,000 square feet, and it was $350,000. And then the sale fell through, and I was like, oh, that whatever. Fortunate for us, COVID then happens, and we're like, wow, we shouldn't do that anyway. I looked at a bunch of places. I looked at Montana. I'm like, how cool would it be to just be in the middle of mountains, away from everything? Airports, expensive. Bringing guests out, you're basically flying everybody from the East Coast to the West Coast, which is massively expensive. And I'm like, okay, well, we can't afford to do that. So I looked at, okay, what if we go north of New York? Oh, good luck. All the way north to Connecticut, New Hampshire. It's ridiculously expensive. Maine's not bad. Still a little bit expensive, and the airport is okay, but then you're basically flying everybody south. It gets expensive. So I'm like, we need something central. Cassandra recommended West Virginia. And I was like, that could work. And so what we looked at was, let's say we go to New York. And I was like, what if we went to Chicago or New York? And it's like, anywhere you go in those cities, the drive from the airport's an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if we were to set up in Manhattan, or even Williamsburg, or in Bay Ridge in New York, we're talking an hour and a half from someone landing at the airport and then being driven to the studio. Not to mention tolls, taxes. The taxes are insane. And I was like, if we set up in West Virginia and drive an hour to the airport, at least you're moving fast. Because I'll tell you this, I would rather drive an hour and a half at 65 miles an hour than drive an hour and a half at 10 miles an hour.
Yes, no doubt.
And so I was just like, we can get cheaper land, we get bigger space, we can build more, we can expand more. And in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia, with better laws, constitutional carry, we have less security costs, and we can hop in the car, and we can be in DC, we can be in Reston, we can be in there's Frederick even. You've got big cities. But in terms of like, if you're somebody who's got I want to go to the city and go to steakhouse, it's 50 minutes. 50 from here to there. If you were in Brooklyn, it'd be the same thing. And if you're in Bay Ridge, it's going to take even longer than that. So the costs are way less. The land is way cheaper. Your cost of living is way cheaper. You still have all of these urban metros available to you. From where we are, Pittsburgh's what, 2 hours? Two and a half?
2.5, yeah.
2.5 hours to Pittsburgh. Then you've got Philly, which is 3. You've got DC, which is an hour. Baltimore's an hour. Richmond is probably what, 3?
I think
About
it's
3.
2,
Yeah.
2.5, 3 hours?
Yeah, 2.5, 3.
So I'm just saying, I get it. But I'm looking at this right. If I'm going to build a company, building in New York is the stupidest move imaginable. Building on the West Coast, also very, very. Look, the West Coast, it's just obvious. There's very few markets. There's much less people, and it's expensive to operate. East Coast is where it's at for a lot of reasons. But if you're trying to operate in New York or even any of these big East Coast cities, it's going to be expensive, dangerous, hard to move, hard to get space. And look, there are worse places than New York, but New York is not a good place. That's why at first we were like, if we're on the Jersey side of things, we get cheaper real estate, more space, and we still have access to New York. And it was, look, we were in the Woodbury area, like I mentioned, when the Summer of Love happened. And I thought to myself, we're fine. Philly's going nuts. There's shootouts. There's craziness going on. But that's why we're on the other side of the bridge in Jersey. And then the riders crossed the bridge into our area, and I could hear the helicopters not too far from my house. And I was like, I don't want to be in a place like this. Because in New Jersey, if someone kicks in your door and literally screams they're going to kill you, you can't defend yourself. Excuse me. They'll tell you day and night you can, but you cannot. In West Virginia, it's constitutional carry. You walk into the gun shop, you fill up your NICS form, they hand you your gun, and you put it in your holster and you walk out. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.